My son called me a monster, the same word his mother used before she died wearing that necklace. That sentence didn't just break me. It resurrected every ghost I'd buried for the last 20 years. It was my 62nd birthday. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your bones ache. I was waiting for a call, maybe a visit, something from my son, Adam. Instead, I got a message. "Dad, can we talk?" For a second, my heart lifted. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he forgave. When he arrived that evening, he didn't even look around. The walls that once held his childhood laughter now made him uneasy. He stood by the doorway, eyes hard, voice steady. "Dad, I think it's better if you don't come to the wedding." I froze. "What?" He didn't stutter. "You've hurt enough people already." That sentence cut through me like cold steel. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The air between us thickened, heavy, like smoke after a fire you thought was out. He shifted, uncomfortable but determined. He didn't see the man who raised him, and he saw the shadow that took his mother. And in a way, he wasn't wrong. 20 years ago, his mother, Laura, died in what the papers called a tragic household accident. They said an electrical fault in her necklace caused it to spark and burn, stopping her heart. I was the one who gave her that necklace. It was supposed to be an anniversary gift. A handcrafted piece with a silver pendant and a tiny, intricate circuit inside. She loved vintage gadgets, always said they made her feel alive. But that night, it took her life instead. Everyone pitied me, the grieving husband, the poor man who lost everything. But grief can be a clever disguise for guilt. And guilt never really leaves. It just waits for the right voice to wake it up again. When Adam looked at me that night, it wasn't with hate, it was with clarity. As if he'd finally solved a puzzle he'd been too afraid to touch. "I'm marrying Claire," he said, breaking the silence. "She makes me happy, and I don't want that darkness around us." Darkness. That's what I'd become to him, not a father, but a curse. I nodded slowly. "If that's what you want." He exhaled, relieved, as if I'd just signed some silent contract. To stay gone. To disappear politely from his perfect life. He left without saying goodbye. I watched him drive away, headlights cutting through the fog, like knives. Later that night, I walked down the hallway, stopping outside his old room. It hadn't changed. The posters, the dusty trophies, the framed photo of him with his mother. She was smiling, wearing that same silver necklace. I touched the glass, tracing her face. The image flickered in my memory. The smell of burnt metal, the scream, the silence that followed. I could still hear her last words before she stormed out that night. "You're a monster, Michael. You destroy everything you love." Now, my son had said the same thing. I sat down, head in my hands. I'd spent 2 decades trying to prove that accident didn't define me. I built my life around regret, thinking maybe love could erase what guilt had carved. But you can't rebuild something that's been rotting from the inside. The next morning, I heard laughter from outside. I opened the window. Adam was in the garden, my garden, with her, the fiancé. Her hair was golden, sunlight dancing through it. She leaned into him, whispering something that made him laugh like a boy again. I hadn't seen that smile since before Laura died. But then I saw it, around her neck, the necklace. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My chest tightened, my pulse thundered. It wasn't possible. I'd buried that piece, locked it away in a chest years ago. And yet, there it was, glinting under the sun, resting on her skin like a secret that never died. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. Through the window, I watched them kiss. His hands on her shoulders, her laughter echoing into my home, my grave. And in that moment, I knew two things for certain. First, that my wife's death wasn't done with me. Second, that my son had just chosen her over me, just like his father once chose Laura over the truth. I lost my wife to that necklace. Now my son would lose everything because of it. They say time heals everything. But time doesn't bury ghosts. It only teaches them how to whisper. 20 years ago, I gave Laura that necklace. It was supposed to be my masterpiece, my apology made of silver and light. I was a mechanical engineer back then, obsessed with building things that lasted. A pendant with a miniature cooling system, an experimental design that used a low-voltage circuit to stay warm in winter and cool in summer. It was the kind of thing that made people say, "Michael Hale, the man who turns love into invention." But that night, love turned into electricity. We'd been married for 15 years. The laughter was gone, replaced by sighs, polite nods, and quiet dinners where our forks were the loudest sound. She used to smile when I walked into a room. Then one day she stopped looking up at all. And then came him, Daniel Reeves, my best friend since college. The kind of man who always arrived when things were falling apart and left with the pieces that weren't his. I saw the way Laura looked at him, the softness in her voice, the way she wore makeup again, the color she hadn't touched in years. One night I followed her to the old cottage near the lake. Her car was there, his was too. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching the lights go out one by one. When she came home, just before dawn, she smelled like someone else's cologne. That morning, I left the necklace on the table, freshly polished, gleaming, perfect. A peace offering, a symbol of love. Or maybe a test. That night, we argued. Not shouting, more like slicing each other open with truths too sharp to hold. "You destroy everything you love," she spat, eyes red and shaking. "Everything you touch turns rotten." I said nothing, because deep down, I feared she was right. She stormed out of the kitchen, still wearing the necklace. The next morning, the phone rang before sunrise. The voice on the other end was trembling. "Mr. Hale, I'm so sorry, there's been an accident." When I arrived, the paramedics were still there. The bathroom was filled with the smell of ozone and burnt plastic. The necklace had shorted out. A spark had hit water, and she was gone before she could scream. The police ruled it an accident. Faulty wiring, they said. I didn't deny it. I didn't defend myself. I just watched the lights from the ambulance flicker across the silver pendant in the evidence bag. After the funeral, I kept the necklace. Not as a reminder, so as a warning. I sealed it in a wooden box, buried it beneath the willow tree in the backyard. That night, I made a promise. I'll never let it see the light again. But promises rot, too. 20 years later, I was drinking coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from Adam. "Dad, Claire's wearing Mom's necklace. It fits perfectly." For a moment, I didn't understand. My brain refused to. I read it again, slower, as if comprehension would hurt less the second time. "Claire's wearing Mom's necklace." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. How? I'd buried that box. Sold the house years ago. There was no way anyone could have found it. Unless I searched her name, Claire Reeves. The surname hit me like a blow. Reeves. Daniel Reeves. The man who took my wife from me. My breath caught, my vision blurred. I could taste metal on my tongue. Claire Reeves. My son's fiancée. The daughter of the man who destroyed my marriage. She was wearing Laura's necklace. I stared at the wall for hours that night. Every sound amplified. The ticking clock. The hum of the refrigerator. The ghostly hiss of wires in the dark. I could almost hear Laura's voice again. Soft and cruel. Echoing from the past. You destroy everything you love. Maybe I did. Maybe I would again. Because when the dead come back wearing your gifts, they don't come for peace. They come for closure. And the next time that necklace sparked, I promised it wouldn't be an accident. The dead don't rest when their gifts return. They say every wedding begins with a promise of forever, but some promises were written in blood long before the vows were. The Hale estate had never looked so radiant. Rows of white roses lined the aisle. Golden chandeliers shimmered above crystal glasses, and cameras flashed from every angle. It was the kind of wedding you'd see on television. A perfect love story for people who needed to believe such things still existed. And yet not a single chair had my name on it. I watched from the shadows near the back, hidden among strangers dressed in silk and smiles. No one recognized me. Maybe that was the cruelest part. That after raising him, feeding him, burying his mother, my own son could make me invisible in a room built for my sacrifices. The air smelled like champagne and lilies, the same scent that lingered on Laura's skin the night she died. I could see him up there. Ethan, my son, so sure of himself, so radiant under the soft glow of the chandeliers. His bride stood beside him, Claire Reeves, the girl with my dead wife's smile and my best friend's last name. And around her neck, the necklace, my necklace. It glimmered under the lights, perfectly polished, humming faintly against her collarbone like a mechanical heartbeat. The audience gasped at how beautiful it looked. I nearly laughed. Beauty had always been its camouflage. The minister began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness. My pulse pounded in my ears. Each word felt like dirt being shoveled onto a grave that hadn't finished sinking. Then came the line I'd been waiting for. If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. The room fell into silence, and then I stood. Every head turned. The music stopped mid-note. Ethan's jaw dropped. Claire blinked, confused, her hand tightening around the bouquet. Yes, I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle. I object. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan's voice trembled with fury. Mom, what the hell are you doing here? I walked forward, each step deliberate. My heels clicked against the marble floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. I came to make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Claire blinked, uncertain. I don't understand. I looked straight at her, ignoring my son. The bride, I said softly, is wearing my husband's death. The crowd exploded. People murmured, filming, whispering, backing away as if tragedy were contagious. Reporters lifted their phones. Somewhere, a flash went off, capturing the moment a family finally collapsed under its own secrets. Ethan rushed toward me, panic and anger in his voice. You're out of line. You shouldn't be here. I smiled sadly. You said I ruin everything I touch, remember? He froze. His face went pale. Let's see, I whispered, if she can survive my touch too. Before anyone could react, I reached out and brushed my fingers across the necklace, just a touch, a light, ghostly caress. The pendant sparked faintly, a flicker so small no one noticed except me. Claire gasped. The metal felt warm, alive, pulsing against her skin. Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "It's okay, baby, it's okay." But it wasn't. She clawed at the clasp, panic rising. "It's burning." "No," Ethan shouted, fumbling to help her. The crowd recoiled, thinking she was fainting from nerves. I stepped back, watching the chaos unfold like an old play I'd already seen too many times. "Take it off," she screamed. The clasp snapped. The necklace hit the floor with a metallic ring. For a split second, the scent of ozone filled the room. Faint, but unmistakable. She dropped to her knees, trembling. Ethan knelt beside her, his voice shaking. "What did you do?" I stared down at the pendant, still humming softly on the ground. "Nothing," I said. "I just reminded her what she's wearing." Security swarmed in, rough hands grabbing my arms, dragging me away. Ethan shouted something, maybe an insult, maybe my name. The guests backed away, clutching their pearls, phones raised high, recording every second. The lights from the cameras were blinding. White, relentless, merciless. They thought I was mad. They thought I was the villain crashing a fairy tale. Outside, the cold air hit me like punishment. Photographers surrounded me, flashes stinging my eyes as questions sliced through the night. "Who are you? Why did you do it? Is it true the necklace killed your husband?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Through the ballroom window, I saw Claire sobbing in Ethan's arms. He was holding her, whispering comfort, the same way his father once held me before everything burned. The cycle had begun again. As the security guard pushed me toward the exit, I looked back one last time. My voice was calm, almost tender. "You said I ruin everything I touch," I murmured, "but you never asked why I touch it in the first place." The reporters were still shouting, the cameras flashing like lightning. They dragged me to the car, shoved me inside, and shut the door. As the vehicle rolled away, I caught one last glimpse of the mansion. Lights flickering, guests scattering, the necklace lying abandoned on the floor like a serpent shedding its skin. Everyone thought I was insane. Maybe I was. But I also knew one truth, and by morning, the necklace would prove me right. Because some curses don't end with death. They just wait for a wedding. They say weddings are about new beginnings. But some families don't start over. They just resurrect their ghosts. The ballroom looked like a cathedral of gold and light. Crystal chandeliers glimmered like frozen stars. Rows of cameras lined the walls, ready to broadcast the perfect fairy tale. And there, in the middle of it all, my son, Adam, stood in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the kind his mother always said made men look like liars. I hadn't been invited, but grief doesn't wait for invitations. As I stood at the back, unnoticed among the glittering crowd, I could feel every heartbeat in my throat. My palms were sweating against the small mahogany box I held. Polished, unassuming, and pulsing with the weight of 20 years. Up front, the master of ceremonies adjusted his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the groom would like to say a few words." Adam stepped forward, his voice calm, steady, his mother's voice. "This day isn't just about love," he said, his gaze drifting upward. "It's about legacy, about remembering where we came from. This is for my mom. I wish she were here." Applause filled the room. Some people wiped away tears. Claire, radiant in white, reached for his hand and kissed it. I could almost hear Laura's laugh echoing from the grave. That was when I moved. Every head turned as the doors creaked open. The sound sliced through the applause like a blade through silk. I stepped inside, slow, steady, the box cradled in my hands. The cameras found me first, because the cameras always do. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adam froze. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I smiled. That polite, measured smile I'd practiced for years at funerals and board meetings. "Delivering a family heirloom." A murmur swept through the guests. I walked past them, each step echoing like a drumbeat. Claire's eyes followed me, curious, cautious, though she had no reason yet to fear me. When I reached the altar, I stopped. The minister looked uncertain, caught between ceremony and chaos. I placed the box on the table between them. "A wedding deserves a blessing," I said softly. "Something old, something borrowed, something that belongs." Adam's voice trembled. "Dad, please don't do this." I ignored him. With deliberate calm, I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in black velvet, the necklace gleamed like liquid moonlight. The pendant hummed faintly under the stage lights, a faint shimmer alive, whispering history through its shine. The guests gasped at its beauty. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her eyes wet. Tears. Of course there were tears. I smiled faintly. "It belonged to your mother." The applause stuttered. Died." The air thickened. Adam frowned. "What did you just say?" Claire looked up slowly, confusion crossing her face. My mother's name was Laura." For a moment, the world stopped spinning. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. The silence wasn't quiet. It was heavy, like the air before lightning strikes. I felt every gaze pinning me down, every memory clawing its way up my throat. I turned toward her, and then I saw it. The eyes, the same honey-brown shade, the same tremor in her voice when she said Laura. It was like looking at the past wearing a younger skin. "No," Adam whispered, his voice cracked. "Dad, what are you saying?" I took a step closer. "I'm saying the blood never left this family." Claire's face drained of color. She stumbled back, clutching her chest. No, that's impossible." I saw her knees buckle before anyone else did. The box hit the floor, the necklace spilling out, gleaming cold and alive. Then, silence shattered. Screams. Chairs scraping. A reporter's camera clattered to the ground, its flash exploding like a gunshot. Adam dropped to his knees beside her, shouting for help. The crowd surged forward, some filming, some crying, others whispering the word curse like it still meant something in a modern world. I stood still, watching, listening. The smell of ozone, faint, familiar, filled the air. The necklace flickered once, twice, and then stopped glowing. She lay there pale, but breathing. For now. Paramedics rushed in, dragging cables, lights, and questions. Adam yelled at me, his voice breaking with something between rage and horror. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because in that moment, as they lifted her onto the stretcher, her hand brushed mine, cold, trembling. And she looked at me, not as a stranger, not as her fiancé's father, but as if she knew me. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. "Dad?" Every bone in my body turned to ice. The cameras caught it. The guests gasped again. Adam's voice cracked behind me. Stop filming." But the world doesn't stop for tragedy. It feeds on it. As the paramedics wheeled her away, her hand slipped from mine, the necklace still dangling from her wrist. Reporters shouted. Flashes blinded me. But I didn't hear them. I only heard her voice echoing in my skull. Dad? My knees nearly gave out. I looked down at the fallen pendant. The same piece that had taken Laura now returned in her daughter's bloodline. It was never about revenge. Not anymore. It was about inheritance. And as they carried her out, I whispered to no one, or maybe to the ghost still watching through her eyes. Now you understand. The blood never left this family. Outside, the sirens wailed like an unholy choir. Inside, the necklace lay forgotten, still warm to the touch. By morning, every news outlet would play the footage. Every screen would flash with headlines. And everyone would know what I'd always known, that death doesn't end bloodlines. It just waits for the wedding. They say time heals, but time doesn't heal what you refuse to admit. It just teaches you how to live with the ghosts. It had been a year since the wedding, a year since Claire's collapse, a year since the world turned our family name into a headline. I'd moved far from the city, a small cottage near the coast. Quiet, gray, anonymous. The kind of place where memories could rot undisturbed. That night, the air was cold enough to sting. I was pouring tea when I heard the knock. Slow, hesitant, the sound of someone who almost turned back twice before arriving. I didn't need to open the door to know who it was. When I did, he looked nothing like my son. Ethan stood there, pale, older than his years, the spark in his eyes long gone. His hair had silver streaks now, his face hollowed by too many sleepless nights. He looked like a man haunted not by what he'd lost, but by what he'd begun to understand. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice brittle. I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't sit right away. He wandered through the small living room, his eyes catching on the old photographs I hadn't taken down. Him as a child. Laura's smile frozen forever behind the glass. Finally, he spoke. "I went to see Claire." I froze. "She's getting better," he continued quietly. "Doctors say she'll make a full recovery. She doesn't remember much from that night, only flashes. But sometimes she dreams about a woman's voice, whispering her name." He turned to face me. "Was it you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't answer. I just stared into my tea, watching the ripples tremble. Then he said it. "Did you kill Dad too?" There it was. The question I'd been waiting 2 decades to hear. I looked up slowly. His eyes were wet but steady, as if he already knew the truth, but needed to hear it aloud to finally hate me properly. "Your father," I began, voice calm, "killed himself the day he stopped loving his family." Ethan's breath hitched. I paused, letting the silence thicken until it felt like confession. Made sure it happened faster. He stumbled back, shaking his head. No, that's not." "Your father had already left us long before that night," I said, voice rising. "His heart, his loyalty, his love, they were all gone. He was just breathing out of habit." Tears streaked his face. "You destroyed everything." I smiled faintly, a tired, broken smile. "No, Ethan, I kept what was left." He flinched as if struck. The clock ticked in the background. Slow, deliberate, cruel. Finally, he spoke again. "You don't even regret it, do you?" I looked at him. At the man who once clung to my hand in hospital hallways. At the boy who believed monsters lived under his bed when all along, one had been tucking him in every night. "I regret that you can't see what I saved you from," I whispered. "Your father would have hollowed you out, just like he did me. He would have left you empty, smiling for cameras dying behind your eyes." He shook his head, backing away toward the door. "You justify everything, even murder." I didn't stop him. Some truths aren't meant to be defended, only endured. When he reached the doorway, he turned. His voice cracked. "You know, I used to think you were the strongest person I knew." I said nothing. He set something on the table, a small bundle wrapped in white funeral cloth. "I don't want this anymore," he said. Then he left. The door shut softly behind him, but the silence that followed was deafening. For a long time, I couldn't move. My eyes stayed locked on the bundle. Finally, I reached for it. The cloth was cold, damp with sea air. I unwrapped it slowly. The necklace. Still gleaming, still perfect, as if it hadn't carried two deaths, a wedding and a curse. I held it in my palm, tracing the edge with my thumb. The metal was cool, innocent, almost kind. It hummed faintly, like a heartbeat remembering what it used to be. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I saw Laura, laughing in the kitchen, her hair catching the sunlight. Then I saw her face burning with betrayal, her voice slicing through the air. "You destroy everything you love." Maybe she was right. Maybe love was just another form of destruction, a slow, patient, merciful, only to the grave. I placed the necklace on the table beside the teacup and whispered, "Now it's finally clean." The light flickered once, the hum faded. Outside, the tide came in, and for the first time in 20 years, the house was silent. They say revenge ends when justice is done, but justice never came, only silence. It's been a year since the wedding, the one they now call the wedding that should never have happened. Headlines turned into folklore. The footage still circulates online every few months, reborn through the fascination of strangers. Adam vanished after that day. No trail, no farewell. Some say he left the country. Others say he walked into the sea wearing his tuxedo. I think he just ran out of places where his reflection didn't look like mine. Claire survived, and if you can call it that. She lives now in a quiet hospital outside the city where the windows don't open and the clocks have no ticking hands. Nurses say she doesn't speak, doesn't eat much, but she still wears the necklace, always. At night they say she hums, the same melody Laura used to sing when she washed the dishes, the same one that played the morning she died. And me? I live alone, in a house that hums when the lights go out. Every night I hear the faint buzz of electricity through the walls, like the ghost of that necklace whispering that nothing ever really ends. It just changes form. People call me a monster, maybe they're right. But monsters don't wake up haunted by the things they've done. I tell you this because you should know. Revenge doesn't resurrect the dead. It just lets you meet them again. The wind rattles the window. Somewhere in the dark, a faint spark flickers. Small, electric, alive. I close my eyes and whisper. My son chose his bride over me. He didn't know he was choosing me twice. Fade to black.